Holy City Center Radio, it is episode 335, and I am your host, Christian Sanger. Today is Wednesday, January 29th, 2025. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the show. Thank you so much for returning. I greatly appreciate it. I hope your week is going well. I am enjoying the fact that most of the ice and snow is gone at this point, and temperatures have not been too bad. Much different than last week, that is for sure. So I hope you all are enjoying what is better weather, in my opinion. I hope that's not going out on a limb too much. Enjoying that weather this week, and everything's going well in your world. If you're looking for things to do in town, remember, go to holycitycenter.com/calendar, and you can check out everything that's going on, any day for months and months, and in some cases, a year plus in the future, depending on how early things have been announced. And as a teaser, there has been a few, big name concerts that have been announced. It's that time of year, the winter months when these announcements start coming through for, May, June, July, August, and on, when things are a little warmer and, bands want to go to some outdoor venues, say. There's been some announcements that may be interesting to all of you. You can see all that, of course, on the website, holycitycenter.com. All right. No more shameless self-promotion. Let's get into the news. First, just a quick little national update. Like I've said, I'm going to touch on things that's going on with the Trump administration. It's going to be hectic, especially these first 100 days, when executive orders are being pushed out and announcements are being made, people are being confirmed for, different positions and blah, 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 blah. And unless it, deserves a deep dive for whatever reason, and most of these stories just aren't, at least not in this platform. There's other places you can go and get commentary and things like that. But I will provide little updates here and there. First, we're going to be talking about the January 6th folks. Well, tangentially, in the next. Tangentially? We're going to leave that in the next story. It's not about them per se, but that question about them being pardoned or having sentences commuted was broached with National Nancy, and her response was predictable. So we're going to get into that in a moment. And I just wanted to provide an update. At least 3 of the January 6th folks, rioters, whatever you want to call them, that have been pardoned have already found themselves in some sort of trouble. So these are violent criminals who were allowed back out, before they were supposed to, based on their sentences, and have, in some cases gone on to potentially commit another violent act or some other crime. This is wildly predictable. But anyway, one person, and you can go look up each of these stories. They're covered everywhere. There's one person, this man who he actually had some sort of, crime involving a child that was, or, child abuse material online that was pending before January 6th. So this wasn't a new thing, but it just shows that this person who was in prison for committing a violent crime also had a pending case still out there. So that's still out there. So that's not really like he committed something new, but just that's something to know. Another man was arrested on gun charges already after being released. And the third, the details are still pretty murky. It just hit the news, and, there's still a lot that needs to be worked out. But another violent January 6th criminal who had been pardoned was pulled over by police for some reason. We don't know why at this point. Got in some sort of altercation with the police officer. And then the police ended up using lethal force, shot and killed the man. Now, the police say that's all based on the police. Obviously, the gentleman who was shot and killed isn't going to be able to tell his story. And at this point, there's been no witnesses that have come forward to say anything different. It's very early, so who knows how that will play out. How sometimes things could be with police where you're only hearing their side of the story, and then as time goes on, things could change. Body camera footage might contradict some things they've said, etc. So there's still a chance that something could come out of that story. But as of right now, if we're just going based on what the police said, they pulled over this person, he got in some kind of altercation with police, they felt they had to use violent force against him. Usually that means he was threatening, if someone's being, if police deem they need to use lethal force. Now, again, we've seen very many problematic instances where they shouldn't have, but they're supposed to use it if they feel that their life is in or other people's lives are in immediate danger. So that's where that's at. Just putting that out there, as it was completely predictable. And again, that last story especially may change. But just keep that in the back of your mind as we talk about that first story. The other thing to know about the Trump admin, there's a bunch of confusion today. And again, just like that last story, there's a lot to still be worked out. Something that seems like incredibly nefarious could have just been, honestly, incompetence or not realizing the fallout or bad communication. Because what's happened is all federal grants have been paused. And federal grants they cover all sorts of things, but the ones that people are most concerned about today when we're recording, which is Tuesday, has to do with programs like Meals for Wheels, or different things involving veterans, VA projects and things like that. There's also some concerns about Medicaid going on today because of some other things that have been said or supposedly the admin is doing. Basically, at best, there's a lack of communication, and some of these really important things that the vast majority of Americans would support continuing. Maybe they just were, you know, hey, look, everything's fine. You're not part of this pausing. This is for different entities. That's best case scenario here. Worst case scenario, of course, is they're doing this for some other nefarious reason. I don't know what that would be. So we'll see how this plays out. Trump admin had said that certain programs would not be paused, but there's been a bunch of reports about a lot of organizations are unable to access the funds that have been allotted to them through this system that they have with the government. So there's a lot of confusion and a lot to be worked out. But this is what happens when you have you know people like Trump and his people in his orbit back in office. A lot of them, even though they spent 4 years, some of them in the last admin in the government, a lot of them don't have previous government experience, let alone on this level. Uh, they they don't operate like normal politicians do, and I know that's why some people love Trump. But they don't know the norms. They don't foresee confusion. They don't look far enough ahead. They're like, hey, like I said, they could want to pause federal grants for some. I'm sure there's some, DEI or what they think is DEI program that they're really trying to attack or something, and they didn't think it through that, oh, this will also pause programs that Americans, by and large, including Trump supporters, like Meals on Wheels. Like what is the percentage of people who support Meals on Wheels continuing and those that don't? You know what I mean? Like stuff like that. So I'm guessing that's what it is. And again, that's the best case scenario. But that causes a lot of, even that, in the end, if nothing really affects people, the funds keep going through. The anxiety, the problems, the issues that it causes unnecessarily, just because they announce something without, following through appropriately. It's just, I don't know. It's frustrating because little things like that, I know in the grand scheme of things, if it really isn't as big of a deal as it could be, and it is just a lack of communication, in comparison to other things, I know it's not a huge, huge deal, but it's just a small sampling of just how hectic this admin was 4 years, well, yeah, 4 to 8 years ago when it started, uh, and how it's already kind of back in that, just a lot of confusion. People aren't really sure what's going on. Things are not thought through or explained appropriately. And it's just, yeah, that's why it seems like every day there's a crisis when, tomorrow we could be like, oh no, it was just this small thing. Like, yeah, it caused 24 hours of confusion and worry for people, but that's all it was. Again, that's still significant. Things should run smoothly and appropriately. Anyway, let's get into local news. And yes, it's national. Nancy, cash me outside, Mace. Um, Definitely is running for governor, by the way. Ever since that article where she said she's thinking about it, she's gone on to other places and spoke here in the state. And she keeps posting stuff on social media that alludes to her wanting to be home in South Carolina and at the state house. And she's definitely running for governor. But putting that aside, she was asked a simple question, one that a lot of Republicans have been asked, and it didn't go so well. So yes, Representative Nancy Mace started verbally sparring with veteran reporter John Monk. He writes for the state newspaper. He asked her a question that a lot of Republicans have been asked regarding these January 6 pardons. And he asked her whether violent offenders from the January 6 riots should have been pardoned by Donald Trump. I mean, easy question. Lots of Republicans have been asked it. No one has really answered it very well. And Mace, you can add her to the list of people who did not answer it very well. So first, she responded that those pardoned by Trump for their actions on January 6 have served their time. That was it. She was pressed on it a little bit. Now, I already talked to you at the top about 3 guys who already are in trouble after being released or had some stuff from their past, that was still out there, who have been pardoned. But to bring it to the state level, just so you have some numbers and ideas in your head about the people that Donald Trump has released back into our communities. Now, specifically, South Carolina, this state. His order freed 2 violent offenders from prison and kept out 1 person who was sent to report to prison for attacks on police. So that person was on his way to prison, and that stops. So that's 3 violent offenders. They committed violent acts. One specifically against police officers. They are now back out in the community. Are they back home in South Carolina? Who knows for sure, but that's where they were from when they were arrested. In addition to that, cases were dismissed against 2 other South Carolina men who had pending violent offense charges. So they haven't even been convicted yet. So that's now 5. Yes, 5. Sorry. Couldn't remember about that one in the middle there. That's 5 people from South Carolina, all men, who have committed violent offenses and were let out of prison or pardoned or whatever before they served their time or were even convicted. So, who knows? Those last 2 might not have been convicted, but they had charges against them. So that's 5 that are back in our state that have committed violent acts. On top of that, Trump also pardoned 2 additional South Carolina men who had already served their prison terms for violent offenses. So they had actually served their time and were out of prison. He just pardoned them, meaning that those charges are no longer on their record. So that's 7 people in total who had violent offenses, but those last 2 did serve their time. So that's a little different in my eyes as far as what we're talking about. But it's just to put it in perspective of the type of folks involved in this whole January 6th riot. So you have that background now. Now, veteran reporter that we talked about, John Monk of the state, he pressed Nancy on that because that's not a good enough answer. So this verbal debate started when he, kind of pressed her a little bit, like, okay, sure, but what about violent offenders? Should they have been pardoned? And Mace says, quote, "I would like to know your thoughts on the people that tried to burn Charleston down after the Black Lives Matter riots. Where were you when people were with long barrel guns were marching in downtown Charleston?" End quote. She goes on, quote, "Somebody like you in the legacy media wants to give everybody a pass for Antifa members, Black Lives Matter members that tried to burn cities down and didn't serve a single day in jail," end quote. Okay, let's touch on that real quick. Putting aside the fact that the state newspaper, who Monk works for, as well as all other media entities in the state, Post and Courier, local TV stations, some radio stations, alternate sources, like alt papers, like the Charleston City Paper or the Free Times in Columbia, they all covered the 2020 Black Lives Matter protests, George Floyd protests. It was all covered. They didn't mince words. They mentioned when violent acts or vandalism or whatever occurred. They didn't hide that. They very much reported on it. They also very much reported on the arrests of people, the convictions of people, the trials of those people. This isn't some conspiracy theory, uh, especially here in South Carolina, but even nationwide. You look at other states who had protests where people were arrested. Local media was 100% reporting on it. Just her basis, just where she's starting is BS. It's been reported on. It's been talked about. She's talking about how some didn't serve a single day in jail. Perhaps there were some people who were arrested, who had charges dismissed. That's the same as January 6th. There's a lot of people arrested, had charges dismissed. Or whatever, got off on a technicality or were never found. The same is true in both scenarios. So there's no difference in terms of that. They weren't just willy-nilly, just choosing not to arrest people or letting them out for no reason in either case. The justice system worked in all these scenarios the way it works, and many people went to jail and were convicted in all of this. So it's a whataboutism attempt, but it's not rooted in any fact. So, Monk, there's actually a video. It's not in the state newspaper's report, but you can actually see a video of the interaction. And he even says, like, that's not true, Congresswoman. Like, outright tells her, like, of course, we care. Yes, we did report on that. This is not, what are you talking about? Basically, that's not what he said verbatim, but that's, basically his response is like, no, that's not true. We did report on that. So it just evolves from and also the whole Antifa thing. Can someone point me in the direction of Antifa headquarters? Who's in charge of Antifa? Who is Antifa? It's an anti-fascist movement. Now, historically, Antifa is it's anti-fascist, which, hey, that's good, but they tend to use violent means. And this is in different countries, not just here in the US. But there's not like a single organization, like Black Lives Matter. They created a nonprofit. They have a board or whatever, and yada yada yada. Antifa is just like people who show up and protest. This is a whole different thing. I'm not condoning any violent acts that they committed or anything. I know they exist in some capacity, but their supposed involvement in anything is wildly overblown. But anyway, anybody who identifies as being a member of this kind of wishy-washy group, as far as like I said, they don't have like a set headquarters or meetings, or what I mean. It's hard to kind of keep track of that stuff. It's overblown. But anyway, so you can obviously, these are talking points that she's heard from other conservative media on the national level and things. These are things we've heard since the riots happened. Antifa. Kind of like a boogeyman that like doesn't really exist the way that they claim it does. But in any event, it devolves from there, and then she starts going on, of course, about woe is me and how she's a victim. She, as part of her reasoning for saying it's okay for violent offenders to be pardoned, says that she's been attacked for her stances and was even physically assaulted. You remember someone shook her hand too hard and she showed up with a sling the next day. That's the assault she's talking about. She says, quote, ever since I was assaulted, and I've been saying no men with penises in women's bathrooms, I was physically assaulted. I get death threats every day. Not a single person has been arrested for the acts of violence against me, Mace says. So where were you on that? You're nowhere because you're part of the legacy media. You're a dying breed, end quote. So, couple points. The person who Mace says assaulted her was indeed arrested. So that's false as well. And not only was that man arrested, it was reported on by local media. So, number one, he was arrested. She says no one has been arrested. False. Alludes that no one cares. I mean, they're reporters, if they want to go off the record and say, hey, sorry, you got assaulted, that's fine. They can do that, but they don't have to. Their job is not to go and report, poor Nancy Mace, I feel so bad for her. Their job is to report what happened. They reported that a man shook her hand. Mace says it was assault. The man was arrested. They did their job. They did exactly what they're supposed to, exactly what Nancy's claiming that they didn't do. Also, why does she have to, this obsession with the bathrooms? this whole conversation was about violent offenders, and she's going on a rant about penises in women's bathrooms. That's her words. Like, and of course, the woe is me. I get death threats. Yeah, all members of Congress do. It's horrible. You shouldn't be getting death threats. This isn't, you're not special. This isn't some weird thing that's only happening to you. It happens to all of them, right, left, center. It sucks. It's horrible. It shouldn't happen. If people are assaulting her, they should be arrested. If people are sending her death threats, they should be arrested. It's not the reporter's fault if that's not happening. That is a police issue. That's an FBI issue, depending on the level we're talking about. So this whole thing is just nonsense. Or the whole thing is just unreal. In that same, I don't know what to call it. It's not really a press conference, but she was speaking to reporters. They also asked her about Attorney General Alan Wilson, who is widely expected to run for governor of South Carolina. She's been attacking him relentlessly on Twitter and stuff because she, again, is definitely running for governor, and so is he. So you can plan on both of them running for governor, although neither has confirmed it. Both of their actions seem to show that they're going to do it, and that is why she's constantly attacking Alan Wilson. So that is the latest with National Nancy Cash Me Outside Mace. Lying, trying to whataboutism her way out of the fact that violent criminals were pardoned by President Trump, and trying to act as if that's okay, and that if Joe Biden had done that with people who were associated with a left-wing cause or whatever, that she wouldn't have lost her ever-loving mind over it. So, I mean, no real surprises here, but that's the kind of person that may be our next governor. All right, two quick updates before I go. Scott Bessent, a South Carolina resident and billionaire investor, was confirmed by the U.S. Senate on Monday to serve as President Donald Trump's Treasury Secretary. He cleared the vote with bipartisan support. He had a 68-29 vote. So now he's in the job of advancing Trump's economic agenda, whatever that may turn out to be. Stuff that Trump has mentioned is things like cutting taxes, mostly for the rich, but we'll see if that happens. Trying to curb deficit spending, implementing a plan on tariffs, whatever that's going to turn out to be, we'll see. But the main point here is that Scott Bessent, who is from South Carolina, was officially confirmed. I don't know much about him, even though he's from the state. And actually, I'm pretty sure he has a house on the Battery, if I remember correctly. But when I did like a cursory look into him, he is what you would consider a more normal political appointment. The ones we were used to seeing, the ones where if you're a Democrat, you might not like the person's policies or ideas on things, but you were able to recognize, and vice versa, by the way. If you're a Republican and the Democrat, say Joe Biden is trying to appoint someone, same thing. You might not like their ideas. You might not agree with some of the things that they believe politically, but you can see them as a serious person who can handle a top position in the government. Again, even if they're not going to be your best friend, even if you're like, I disagree with them politically on a lot, but they clearly are qualified for this job. He was one of those more normal ones that we have been used to seeing in past administrations, unlike, say, the Matt Gaetz is of the world, the Pete Hegseth of the world, the Tulsi Gabbards. Matt Gaetz, by the way, dropped out, removed his name. Hegseth was ultimately confirmed. This was more normal. So no surprise. And yes, someone who lives currently in South Carolina. So I wanted to share that news. And lastly, North Charleston Mayor Reggie Burgess plans to deliver the annual State of the City presentation on Thursday of this week. So that will be tomorrow, and assuming you're listening to this podcast on Wednesday. It'll happen during the normal city council meeting. So that'll happen, like I said, Thursday. It's going to be January 30th, 7 p.m. at City Hall. Open to the public, as city council meetings are. There's limited seating. They do put these online, live streams on YouTube and stuff through the City of North Charleston's official page. So you can watch that if you like. And they usually will post, video of just that section online after. But if not, the live video stays up for city council meetings. So you can go watch that if you like. That'll do it for this episode. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you to Lindsay Marie Collins with LMC Sound System for producing this and every episode of Holy City Center Radio. Thank you to Tyler Boone, whose music you hear in each and every show. I'll be back with you on Friday. Already looking forward to it. Until then, though, good night and good luck.